June 4, 1942, 14,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean. Lieutenant Commander Wade McClusky looked down at his fuel gauge and felt his stomach tighten. Almost empty. He'd been searching for the Japanese fleet for over 2 hours. His squadron of dive bombers was scattered. Some planes had already turned back. Others would run out of gas any minute. Below him was nothing but empty blue ocean. The Japanese carriers weren't where they were supposed to be, and if he didn't find them in the next few minutes, this mission was over. McClusky was 40 years old, a fighter pilot most of his career. He'd only been flying dive bombers for a couple months. He wasn't supposed to be the hero. He was just doing his job, leading 2 squadrons, 33 planes total, looking for 4 Japanese aircraft carriers somewhere in all that water. His orders were simple: find them and sink them. But right now, he couldn't even find them. His radio officer kept giving him worried looks. They both knew what empty fuel tanks meant. Ditch in the ocean. I hope someone finds you. Most guys who ditched were never seen again. Then McClusky made a decision that would change everything. Most pilots would have turned back, saved themselves, saved their crews. But McClusky saw something. A single ship, a destroyer, moving fast, heading northeast. It was the Ayrshire, and it was steaming at full speed to catch up to something. McClusky's gut told him what that something was: the Japanese carriers. He turned his entire group to follow that one destroyer. He was betting 33 lives on a hunch. What happened in the next 6 minutes destroyed 3 aircraft carriers, killed over 2,000 Japanese sailors, and won the most important naval battle in the Pacific War. The dive bomber attack McClusky led wasn't just lucky. It hit at the exact perfect moment when the Japanese were most vulnerable. His pilots scored direct hits on carriers loaded with fueled planes, armed bombs, and stacked torpedoes. The explosions didn't just sink ships, they shattered Japan's entire naval strategy. This is the story of how one commander's decision to keep searching, one destroyer going the right direction, and 6 minutes of perfect chaos changed World War II. 6 months earlier, Japan owned the Pacific. They'd smashed Pearl Harbor, taken the Philippines, conquered Singapore, invaded Burma. Their carrier fleet was unstoppable. 4 of those carriers, the Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Soryu, had launched the attack on Pearl Harbor. They were the best carriers Japan had. Fast, powerful, crewed by the most experienced pilots in the world. And in June 1942, they were heading to Midway Island, a tiny American outpost 1,300 miles northwest of Hawaii. Admiral Yamamoto, Japan's top naval commander, had a plan: crush the remaining American carriers, capture Midway, force America to negotiate peace. Japan would control the entire Pacific. The Americans couldn't win. Japan's navy was too strong, too experienced. They'd been fighting in China since 1937. Their pilots had real combat experience. American pilots were mostly kids fresh out of flight school. Japan had the best carrier planes in the world. The Zero fighter could outturn anything America had. The Cape torpedo bomber could strike from miles away. The Val dive bomber was fast and accurate. Japan's admirals were confident, almost cocky. This was going to be easy. But the Americans had broken Japan's naval code. They knew Midway was the target. They knew when the attack was coming. Admiral Chester Nimitz, commanding the Pacific Fleet, sent everything he had: 3 carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown. That was it. 3 carriers against 4. Fewer planes, less experienced pilots. But they'd be waiting. They'd be ready. And they'd have one advantage the Japanese didn't know about: surprise. On the morning of June 4th, Japanese planes hit Midway hard. They bombed the airstrip, destroyed buildings, set fuel tanks on fire. But they didn't knock out the runway. Midway's planes could still fly. The Japanese strike commander radioed back, "We need a second attack." Admiral Nagumo, commanding the carrier fleet, had a problem. He'd kept half his planes in reserve, armed with torpedoes, ready to hit American ships if they showed up. Now he needed those planes to bomb Midway again. He gave the order, change the weapons, swap torpedoes for bombs. His crews went to work. Then everything went wrong at once. A Japanese scout plane spotted American ships, including a carrier. Nagumo froze. His planes were on the hangar decks. Weapons were scattered everywhere. Torpedoes stacked in the corridors. Bombs lying on the deck. Fuel hoses running across the hangars. His carriers were supposed to launch in 20 minutes. Now he needed to change weapons again. Bombs off, torpedoes back on, but he couldn't. His first strike force was returning from Midway, low on fuel. Some planes were damaged. They had to land or they'd crash in the ocean. Nagumo had no choice. Recover the Midway strike first, then rearm, then launch against the Americans. It would take 30 minutes, maybe 45. He just needed time. He didn't get it. American torpedo bombers found the Japanese fleet first. Slow, clumsy planes called Devastators. They came in low, just above the waves. No fighter escort. Japanese Zeros swarmed them like sharks. The first squadron, 15 planes from Hornet, was wiped out. All 15 shot down. Only one pilot survived. The second squadron, 14 planes from Enterprise, went in. Same result, 10 shot down. No hits. The third squadron, 12 planes from Yorktown, attacked. The Zeros tore them apart. 10 more shot down. Still no hits. In 30 minutes, 35 American planes were destroyed. 90 men were killed. The torpedo attacks were a disaster, a complete failure. But they did something nobody planned. They pulled every Japanese fighter down to sea level. At 10:20 in the morning, McClusky finally found them. He'd followed that destroyer for 20 minutes, and there they were, four carriers in a box formation, battleships, cruisers, destroyers, the entire Japanese strike force. He could see planes on the carrier decks. They were preparing to launch. In 10 minutes, maybe less, those carriers would send 100 planes toward the American fleet. McClusky had to hit them now. He broke radio silence, gave attack orders to his squadrons, then he rolled his plane over in Dove. The Japanese never saw them coming. Every Zero fighter was down low, chasing the last torpedo bombers. The ship's lookouts were watching the torpedo attacks. Nobody looked up. McClusky's dive bombers came out of the sun at 15,000 feet, 33 planes in near vertical dives, screaming down at 250 miles per hour. The first Japanese lookout who spotted them screamed a warning. Too late. The bombs were already falling. At 10:22 a.m., the first bombs hit Kaga. One bomb struck just forward of the bridge. It hit a fuel truck. The truck exploded. A wall of fire swept across the bridge. Everyone there died instantly, including the captain. 3 more bombs hit the flight deck. They punched through and exploded in the hangar, where 40 planes sat, fully fueled, armed with bombs and torpedoes. The hangar became an inferno. Explosions ripped through the ship, one after another. The flight deck buckled, twisted. The fires spread in seconds. At the same moment, 3 dive bombers hit Akagi. Only 3 planes. Most of McClusky's group had gone after Kaga, but 3 was enough. One bomb hit the dead center of the flight deck, right behind the midship elevator. It smashed through, exploded in the hangar packed with armed planes. Secondary explosions blew the elevator completely apart. Twisted metal shot upward like shrapnel. Another bomb hit among the planes waiting to take off. They all caught fire at once. Within 30 seconds, Akagi's flight deck was a sheet of flame. The hangar below was worse. At 10:25, 3 minutes after Kaga was hit, Yorktown's dive bombers found Soryu. 13 planes dove on her. They scored 3 direct hits. All 3 bombs hit the flight deck where planes were warming up. The planes exploded. Their bombs cooked off. Their fuel tanks burst. The fire spread to the hangar elevator, down into the hangar where more armed planes were parked. The entire ship erupted. Captain Yanagimoto ordered the abandoned ship abandoned after 20 minutes. The fires were uncontrollable. The ship was doomed. In 6 minutes, 3 Japanese carriers were burning. Not damaged, not crippled, destroyed. The fires couldn't be stopped. The explosions kept coming. The fuel kept burning. The ammunition kept cooking off. These weren't small fires. These were 800-foot-long ships turned into blast furnaces. The heat was so intense it warped the steel decks, melted aircraft into unrecognizable lumps. The smoke could be seen for 50 miles. McClusky pulled out of his dive at 500 feet. His plane was hit. 2 Japanese Zeros had jumped him, put 52 bullet holes in his aircraft. 1 bullet went through his shoulder. He was bleeding. His controls were shut up. His gunner killed 1 Zero. McClusky fought to keep the plane flying. He looked back. All 3 carriers were burning. He'd done it, but his fuel gauge read empty. He wasn't sure he'd make it back to Enterprise. He did. Barely. Landed with less than 5 gallons of fuel left. 10 other planes from his group didn't make it back. They ran out of fuel and ditched in the ocean. Their crews were never found. The Japanese carriers fought to survive. Damage control teams tried to contain the fires. They couldn't. The fires were too big, too hot. Fed by aviation fuel and exploding ordnance, Akagi burned all afternoon. Admiral Nagumo, the fleet commander, refused to leave. His staff had to physically drag him off the ship. He transferred to a cruiser and watched his flagship burn. Akagi stayed afloat until the next morning. Then Japanese destroyers torpedoed her, sent her to the bottom. 263 men died. Kaga lasted until early evening. The fires raged for 7 hours. Explosions kept ripping through her. At 7:25 p.m., she rolled over and sank. 800 men went down with her. A third of her crew. Soryu sank first. The fires were so intense, so destructive, that the ship broke apart. She went down at 7:13 p.m. 711 men were killed. In one day, Japan lost 3 of the 6 carriers that attacked Pearl Harbor. Gone. Sunk, along with most of their best pilots and crew. But the battle wasn't over. One Japanese carrier, Soryu, was untouched. She was sailing several miles away from the other carriers when the dive bombers struck. Her admiral, Taman Yamaguchi, didn't hesitate. He launched everything he had. His planes found Yorktown and hit her hard. 3 bombs, 2 torpedoes. Yorktown was tough. She stayed afloat, but she was out of the fight. Then American dive bombers found Soryu. At 5 p.m., 24 Dauntless dive bombers attacked. 4 bombs hit. Same result as the morning. Planes on deck caught fire. Hangar explosions. Uncontrollable flames. Soryu burned through the night. Japanese destroyers sank her the next morning. Admiral Yamaguchi went down with his ship. By choice, 416 men died. For Japanese carriers, 4 of the best carriers in the world, all sunk in one day. Japan had started the war with 10 carriers. Now they have 6, and they couldn't build new ones fast enough. Japan's shipyards could produce 2 carriers a year. America was building dozens. Japan had also lost 248 planes at Midway. But worse than the planes, they lost the pilots. Experienced combat pilots. Men who'd trained for years. Men who'd fought in China. They couldn't be replaced. Training a carrier pilot takes 2 years. Japan didn't have 2 years. The battle also killed over 3,000 Japanese sailors. Many of them were mechanics, engine specialists, ordnance handlers, the skilled technicians who kept carriers running. These weren't soldiers you could train in a few weeks. These were experts. Japan had a limited number of them, and at Midway, they lost hundreds, some of the best. America lost 1 carrier. Yorktown was finally sunk by a Japanese submarine 2 days after the battle. 141 men died. America also lost 145 planes and about 300 men total. Painful losses, but nothing like what Japan suffered. And America could replace everything: the carriers, the planes, the pilots. America's industrial might was just getting started. In 1942, American shipyards launched 8 carriers. In 1943, they launched 23. By 1944, America was producing 1 new carrier every month. Japan couldn't compete with that. Japan couldn't compete with any of it. McClusky's decision to follow that destroyer changed everything. If he'd turned back, the Japanese carriers would have launched their strike. They would have found Enterprise and Hornet, with no fighters to protect the American carriers. With 100 Japanese planes attacking, Enterprise and Hornet would probably have been sunk. America would have lost 2/3 of its Pacific carrier fleet in one battle. The war would have lasted years longer. Maybe America would have had to negotiate. Maybe Japan would have kept its Pacific empire. We'll never know. Because McClusky kept searching. Because he spotted one destroyer going the wrong way. Because his dive bombers hit at the perfect moment. Admiral Nimitz said it directly. McClusky's decision decided the fate of the carrier task force and the forces at Midway. Some historians say it decided the fate of the entire war. Without carriers, America couldn't fight in the Pacific, couldn't invade islands, couldn't cut off Japan's supply lines, couldn't launch the bombing campaigns that eventually forced Japan to surrender. Midway was the turning point, the moment Japan stopped winning and started losing. And it all came down to 6 minutes on the morning of June 4, 1942. McClusky survived the war. He commanded an escort carrier later on, served in Korea, retired as a rear admiral in 1956. He never talked much about Midway. I didn't think what he did was special. He was just following his training, making logical decisions, doing his job. He bristled when people said he got lucky or made a guess. He said he would have heard if the Japanese were south of him. The patrol planes would have reported it. So he went north. Simple, logical, but simple decisions made under pressure. With lives on the line and fuel running out. Those are the decisions that win wars. McClusky died in 1976. He was 74. By then, most Americans had forgotten his name. He never became famous like some other war heroes, never wrote a best-selling book, never had a movie made about him. But the Navy didn't forget. They named a guided missile frigate after him, the USS McClusky. Every year, they give out the Wade McClusky Award to the best attack squadron in the Navy. And historians who study Midway, who understand what happened that day, they know McClusky made the call, the right call, at exactly the right time. The Battle of Midway proved something America needed to prove, that Japan could be beaten, that American pilots, even without much experience, could fight, that American planes, even if they weren't as fancy as Zeros, could get the job done, that American sailors and Marines, when they were in the right place at the right time with the right intelligence, could win. And it proved that wars aren't just about who has the biggest fleet or the best planes. They're about decisions, split-second calls. Do you turn back or keep searching? Do you follow that destroyer or head home? Do you dive now or wait? McClusky made the right calls, all of them. And because he did, 3 carriers burned. From that day forward, Japan was on defense. Never again did they launch a major offensive in the Pacific. They fought hard, defended islands to the death, but they were reacting, not attacking. America pushed west, island by island, battle by battle, getting closer to Japan, and Japan couldn't stop it, because at Midway, in 6 minutes, the American dive bombers broke Japan's carrier fleet. They took away Japan's mobility, its striking power, its ability to project force across the Pacific. They took away Japan's chance to win the war. Today, the dive bombers from Midway are remembered as heroes, and they were. But the real hero might be the guy who decided to keep looking when everyone else would have turned back. The commander who bet everything on following one destroyer. The pilot who made it back to his carrier on fumes and lived to see his decision change history. Wade McClusky, the man who found the Japanese fleet. The man who led the attack. The man who won Midway. In 6 minutes, those dive bombers sank more Japanese naval power than all of 1941 combined. 3 carriers, 2,000 men, hundreds of planes, all gone. Japan never recovered. America never looked back. Thanks for watching. Next time we'll look at how American submarine warfare strangled Japan's economy and turned the tide even further. If you enjoyed this video, hit that subscribe button. We've got more stories like this coming. Stories about the people who made the decisions, the battles that changed everything, the moments that won the war. See you next time.